Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you for joining us again. Our guest is Dr. Avrum Spira. He's joining us here to talk about why early detection with lung cancer is key, what some recent advancements have unlocked new ways to screen and access cancer. He's also going to talk a little bit about how the Lung Cancer Initiative is collaborating across the medical device, pharmaceutical, and consumer health sectors within Johnson & Johnson. Welcome to Health Professional Radio. Dr. Spira, thank you.
Neil, thank you for having me.
Well, if you would, Doctor, give us a little bit of insight into your area of expertise. Tell us a little bit about your role there at Johnson & Johnson, and talk briefly about the Lung Cancer Initiative, if you would.
Happy to do that. So I'm a pulmonary and critical care physician. I spent the first 15 years of my career in academia as a physician scientist at Boston University, where I spent much of my time clinically and all of my time on the research front battling this very devastating disease of lung cancer. 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to come over to J&J to lead something called the Lung Cancer Initiative. And I came over to J&J because I believe that it is uniquely positioned to transform the trajectory of this devastating disease. The Lung Cancer Initiative is bringing together all three sectors that are within J&J under one umbrella: consumer products, medical devices, and pharmaceuticals to prevent, intercept, and cure lung cancer. And we're doing that in partnership with a very rich external ecosystem of folks in academia, in industry, and in government.
When we're talking about early detection, are we talking 5 years before you're in trouble, 2 years before you're in trouble? What should a person look for in early detection? What would a physician be looking for when they're doing some early detection for lung cancer?
And that's a really important question, Neil. So if we back up for a moment, lung cancer is the number one cause of cancer death in the world. You mentioned 1.8 million people a year die of this disease globally, killing more than the next three cancers combined. And the major reason for that is we almost always detect it at an advanced stage, at a late stage, where cure is difficult to achieve. So today, about 60% of patients diagnosed with lung cancer will be diagnosed at stage 4. That's the latest stage, where cure, again, is very difficult to achieve. So early detection is absolutely critical if we're going to put a dent in this disease. And by early detection, we're referring to not only finding people at an earlier stage, so at stage 1 or 2, which is very, very important, because the earlier the stage of the disease at which you're diagnosed, the better your outcome. But going a step further, and this is an important principle of the Lung Cancer Initiative at J&J, to actually go before someone even develops the lung cancer, in the pre-cancer state, and intercept them from ever getting the disease in the first place. And this was one of the reasons I was attracted to the move over to J&J, because they had come up with this concept. It was really Bill Hite, who was the oncologist who recruited me to J&J. He had this vision for something called World Without Disease. The idea that most companies today, most pharmaceutical companies, focus on later stages of disease for treatment, which is, of course, very, very important. But few companies go early in the disease, and certainly in the pre-disease state. And so he was imagining a world where we actually prevent and intercept most diseases. And they wanted to start with lung cancer because, again, the importance of early detection in making a dent. So it's finding it at earliest stages where possible, and maybe even finding it several years before you get the disease, and preventing it from happening in the first place.
Would I become symptomatic and decide, hey, maybe I need to go to my physician and have my lungs checked? Or is this something that is asymptomatic until stage 3 or 4?
Yeah, another really important question. Lung cancer arises very deep within the lung tissues and generally does not cause symptoms or signs until it's at an advanced stage. I would say stage 3 or 4. By the time you're having symptoms and go to a physician, it's almost always, as I said, stage 3 or 4. We do have some new tools in our arsenal to find lung cancer at an earlier stage, and that's by screening asymptomatic individuals with CT scans of the chest. This is something that's really, I think, broken enormously important ground in the last 10 years in the lung cancer field. And now it is standard of care in the United States to take folks above a certain age with a certain history of tobacco exposure and do an annual CT scan of the chest to try and find lung cancer early. And today, that's our best hope for early detection.
Now, World Cancer Day is coming up August the 1st, and you mentioned how impressed you were with Johnson & Johnson and their cancer treatment. Is this something that Johnson & Johnson has been involved in, or is this a new development for the company?
I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, since Bill Hite joined the organization, there's really been a pivot to this concept of preventing, intercepting, and curing earlier stages of disease, not limited to lung cancer, but across a number of disease areas. So this is really, I'd say, be a relatively recent development, but a very powerful one. And in order to do that, the secret sauce is having all three of the Johnson & Johnson sectors working together holistically: consumer products, medical devices, and pharmaceuticals, because lung cancer is a very complicated disease. It develops over a long period of time. The biology is very complicated. And so having consumer products working together with medical devices and pharmaceuticals gives us the best chance to prevent, intercept, and cure the disease at the earliest possible stage.
Now, Johnson & Johnson is also working with some external partners as well, not simply within Johnson & Johnson. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And that's another factor that I thought about when I joined the company. The fact that Johnson & Johnson does an incredibly great, does a very compelling job of working with the external ecosystem. They recognize at J&J that the best science, the best innovation occurs outside of its own walls. Mm-hmm. And they go out of their way to partner with the best companies, the best academic universities, the best government folks across the world in order to create what I'd call the coalition of the willing, finding partners that can work together with us to prevent, intercept, and cure this devastating disease. And we at the Lung Cancer Initiative have benefited enormously from that type of external partnership, whether it be our work with a company called Veracyte in California, where we're co-developing a nasal swab test that can find people years, to your question earlier, years before they're developing lung cancer and giving us a chance to block them from ever getting the disease, to our partnerships right now with the University of Vermont to take a robotic bronchoscope and have it go out deep into the lung to not only find lung cancer at an earlier stage, but also treat it less invasively and more precisely. That's the kind of solution, innovative solution, one can only do in partnership with a lot of the innovative folks around the globe.
Does the lung cancer initiative there at Johnson & Johnson focus on not only research and treatment options, but what about consumer education? How involved is the LCI in educating us?
I think that's an extremely important part of what we're trying to achieve. You know, lung cancer is a disease that's been stigmatized for decades. People don't talk a lot about it, often blame the victims of the disease for their behavior. And the reality is there's a lot of cynicism around being diagnosed and having effective treatments. Lung cancer is not a disease that needs to kill you anymore. It is a disease that we can find at an earlier stage and we can actually cure. And so the LCI is spending a lot of its effort on educating the public, the community, physicians about the opportunities for earlier detection of this disease. Screening with CT scans is one great example of that. And some of our innovative solutions we're developing for diagnosing and curing the disease less invasively and more precisely. And I mentioned the robotic bronchoscope from a company called Auris Health as one great example of a partnership by which we're doing that.
Give us a website where we can learn more about the lung cancer initiative there at Johnson & Johnson and about early detection options and education for consumers as well.
The best website to go to is www.johnsonandj.com, where you can learn a lot more about what we're doing to prevent, intercept, and cure this devastating disease.
Well, I sure appreciate you joining us here on Health Professional Radio this evening, Dr. Spira. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Neil.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Dr. Avi Spira from Johnson & Johnson. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com, Health Professional Radio.